This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
So, in a giant plot twist, they really are building Dumbles again. And the first thing I said when basically at NAMM's Guitars, Joe Bonamassa sat there with NAMM, and they said that these Dumbles are going to be created again. And then there was like a response from Andy Fuchs and some of the other sort of Dumble interested parties that do like clones and stuff. They said actually that's not the case. They're kind of building it to protect the trademark. It now does turn out that people are, very few people, by the way, I think is going to be the thing with this. It's going to be super exclusive like Dumble always was, but they are in fact building them again. So at the private NAMM booth, a few people, I think the Studio Rats, if you haven't checked out his video, you should check that one out. Gabe Bergman, I think, is going to be doing a recap of NAMM 2025, and he was working in the Dumble booth. Also, Andertons, obviously, they were there as well, and this is kind of what the source is for basically any of this information. Now, the thing was there were two amps there, right, that were new. A lot of the other ones were historical, so they had Stevie Ray's amp, they had like Dumble's own personal amp that he would use, that he would audition players through. Audition, you know, check what their playing was like and see whether he jived with them. Then there was Robin Ford's amp that he sold back to, I think, Matt Swanson, who was there in the booth as well. And then there was the Dumble number 178, which belonged to Larry Colton, who gave it back to Dumble. Not sure why, maybe he wasn't using it. And then Carlos Santana bought that. He put a Jesus sticker on it. It came off, and now that has that distinct like circle in it. That now belongs to Taylor Barefoot. And Tim Pierce did a video with that specific amp that I really encourage you to check out, and Gabe Bergman. But if you're interested in Dumble stuff, that is. What else? There's an overdrive reverb, I believe, was there as well, which he made very, very few of. And then there was two amps there. So first of all, the black amp that was next to Robin Ford's old amp. This was an unfinished build that Dumble started and was never able to complete. This was the first amp that they started to put together, and I think there's basically an amp tech that Dumble respected, and they have loads of documentation and bits and pieces. I've seen actually some notes that Dumble wrote, you know, when an amp would come into him, he would write notes about how players were using them, their settings, and also modifications that were done to the amps and stuff. So he's got like some knowledge there that was written down on paper. It didn't all disappear when he sadly passed away. That black amplifier is part, you know, old Dumble, you know, made with Dumble parts, and he started building that, and then it was finished off. But the grey Dumble, so the suede Dumble, that is in fact entirely new. So Mr. Dumble, as they were calling him, had never actually touched that amp. That amp, I think both of those amps have actually sold. I'm not going to say who to, but they have sold. So this is the kind of the thing that's going to be happening going forward. The reason that all this exists and why this is happening, they mentioned in the video the Dumble Preservation Society. So these guys were friends of Dumble and owned Dumbles, you know, very exclusive sort of club. But what was happening, and I think it's even, I found this online, that some person in England was starting to sell amps with Dumble, like an exact copy, even saying Dumble, and I think he has the trademark, he owns that or something which allows him to do this sort of stuff. And I think this whole exercise is really about putting forth the idea that the Dumble thing is still carrying on in order to protect from that sort of thing, because I'm not an expert on any of this, of course. I'm going to presume that if you were to take a legal case or a trademark, any of this sort of stuff, that the idea is that you're protecting stuff that is still being made, and that's kind of why, in order to protect Dumble properly, you have to be sort of building the odd amp. I think that's basically reading between the lines and listening to what they've said. In order to stop companies just using the Dumble name willy-nilly, they will have to build an occasional amp, be seen as active in the amp building space. You know, you can't just build hats and t-shirts. I think it has to be relevant to the actual trademark in the space that you compete in. So that's why that exists. The grey amp, as I said, is from these schematics, from the knowledge, but it would be missing one of the key elements of a Dumble amp, which is that as they were each made for an individual player, there was this process where that player would come in, spend time with Mr. Dumble, and he would listen to their playing, decide what he thought they needed, and maybe even sometimes like tell them what they needed, and tell them that in time you would come to realize that he was in fact right about some of this stuff. And then, you know, at some point, maybe years down the line, you might get your Dumble amp that you'd ordered a while ago. Going forward, I think it's going to be really only people that already have a Dumble, or that are particularly wealthy and are friends with the owners of Dumble, that might have a chance of getting a Dumble amp. So for Johnny Dickhead like me, or, you know, just regular normal people, I don't think this is going to be an ongoing concern. Essentially, it's like, I don't think you're going to be able to, no matter how much money you've got, just get a Dumble. I think you're going to have to know someone who knows someone, already have a Dumble. So basically, nothing really changes. They are building Dumbles, but probably I can't afford one. I'm not going to be able to get an in to actually get one, and I don't think they're going to be building them in any great quantity. So it's going to remain super exclusive and not be hopefully done in a way that is going to devalue existing Dumbles or degrade the name of Dumble, but is also going to avoid companies coming in and just building an amp with no affiliation to Dumble and sticking Dumble on the chassis, as they were doing, which is exactly the sort of thing that they don't want to happen. What do you reckon? Did you like any of the tones that you heard from it? I thought Studio Rat's video in particular sounded very good. Gabe Bergman as well, if you've not followed him on Instagram and YouTube, has got some great footage of some really cool players. I think Seth Rosenblum sounds amazing on them. Matt Schofield was in there playing. Jared James Nichols was in there playing. So you can hear some people, you know, playing through some Dumbles at exceedingly loud volumes apparently. But yeah, a Dumble amp, not going to be something I'm going to be able to get hold of. Probably you're not going to be able to, unless Wayne you're watching, in which case you're fine. But I think it's interesting to see that this kind of that idea of protecting Dumble by building new Dumbles is kind of like a little bit of a paradox in some ways, right? Paradox? I don't know. Yes.